Hey everyone, welcome to HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Real human stories, nothing more artificial. Because HFY begins with humanity. I'm Naira Solis. Subscribe. The signal starts now. The calibration strip stopped halfway out of its slot and stayed there. Soren looked at it for a moment without touching it. The strip was a thin white ribbon with 3 black marks across it, meant to feed cleanly through the reader, pause, then retract. This one had fed halfway, paused, and forgotten the last part of its job. He set the driver down beside the open panel and leaned closer. The strip trembled once. Not a fault shake. More like the station had changed its mind about something. On the glass wall behind the bench, his reflection was faint and cut by the pale bar of the overhead light. He watched the strip pull back in, smooth now, as if it had never stopped. He picked up the driver again. Across the room, Lyra Venn turned a page by pressing one finger to its corner and flattening it carefully against the desk. She had printed the translation notes instead of keeping them on her tablet. Soren had not asked why. It matched the rest of her habits in the lab. She liked objects that stayed where they were put. "Reader 2?" she said, still looking at the paper. Again. He slid the panel shut with the heel of his hand. Once. She made a mark in the margin with a pencil. Not a word, just a short line. The artifact sat between them inside a clear field cradle, no larger than a travel case, dark at first glance and not dark at second. The surface did not reflect light properly. It softened it, as if the metal were remembering another room and adjusting this one to match. There were no seams, no ports, no script they had agreed was script. The survey tug that found it had logged it as inert mass embedded in basalt under 20 meters of regolith on a moon with no prior signs of habitation. 3 days later, 6 people were on Orpheus. 2 days after that, there were 4. By morning, only Soren and Lyra still had permission to touch anything connected to the find. Soren stood, wiped his fingers on a cloth, and crossed to the cradle. The maintenance light above it was on low. Lyra had requested that after the second day. She said the brighter setting made observation impatient. He checked the cradle alignment by eye first, then with a gauge. Front left bracket was still out by less than a millimeter, the same as it had been since yesterday. He had corrected it twice. It returned to that position by morning every time. He did not correct it now. Lyra lifted her pencil and looked at the object, then at him. "You're leaving it. It prefers that." She considered the word. Prefers. He said nothing. She set the pencil down parallel to the edge of the paper. "You didn't say that yesterday. Yesterday I thought it was thermal settling. And today." He reached past the cradle and pressed 2 fingers to the bench, near the base where a line of dust had gathered in a place the air system should not have allowed dust to gather. "Today I stopped correcting small things." Lyra watched him, then the bracket. Did it change anything? No. She gave that the same silence she gave most claims until they proved useful. At 0900 station time, the outer hatch indicator clicked from amber to green. Neither of them turned. The annex had only one active corridor, and nobody came into Lab 4 without buzzing first. The green light held. Soren looked at the wall clock. 3 minutes early. Lyra glanced at it too, then at the door. A second later, the buzzer sounded. Soren crossed the room. The door seal released with a sigh, and Nemat from station support stepped in with a thermal carrier in one hand and a folded inventory sheet in the other. He stopped after 2 paces, not because of the cradle or the object, but because Lyra had moved her chair slightly sometime during the last hour, and its back edge was where the doorway wanted clear space. "Sorry," he said. Lyra rose, shifted the chair in one clean motion, and sat again. Nemat set the carrier on the side table. "Tea. And the ceramic cups you asked for." "You found ceramic?" Lyra said. "In storage 3. One has a chip." "That will be mine," she said. Nemat offered the inventory sheet to Soren, who did not take it. Lyra did, folded it once more along an existing crease, and tucked it under her notes without reading it. Nemat looked through the glass at the artifact. Most people did that on entering, as if they could delay it by a second and come away unchanged. "Any news?" Soren shook his head. Lyra said, "No activation." Nemat nodded, relieved by the familiar word. Activation meant waiting. Recognition, if anyone had chosen to call it that, meant paperwork. He left. The door sealed. The outer indicator clicked back to amber. Soren opened the carrier and poured. 1 cup white, one with a thin blue line around the rim and a chip near the handle. Lyra took the chipped one. She warmed her hands on it without drinking. The artifact remained still. At 0923, the cradle registered a 1-degree temperature drop. Soren leaned over the display. Lab temperature held steady. Field level steady. Power draw unchanged. Lyra rose with the cup still in her hand and came to stand beside him. She did not look at the display first. She looked at the artifact. Then she set the cup down on the bench, exactly on an old circular stain left by somebody years before either of them had boarded Orpheus. "Again?" she asked. "Third time this morning." She reached toward the cradle and stopped with her hand above the clear field. Not touching. Measuring distance by instinct. It happens when someone enters. Nemat entered 31 minutes ago. He was expected. Soren looked at her. She moved her hand a little lower. The monitor flashed a warning line, thin and polite. She withdrew at once. What about the supply cart at 8? It dropped then too. Who was pushing it? He checked the log. Meyer. She took her cup, drank, and watched the object over the rim. Meyer hasn't been inside this lab. No. But he walked past the outer corridor. Soren turned the log off. You think proximity matters. I think categories matter. She sat again. Expected. Unexpected. Invited. Not invited. That's not a category system. That's a story. It becomes a system if it repeats. He picked up the inventory sheet from under her notes. She let him. On the back, he drew 4 columns and wrote names in block print. Crew. Visitors. Remote. Unknown. Lyra leaned over and moved Meyer from visitors to remote with the pencil tip. He was behind 2 doors, Soren said. He was still observed. By what? She looked at the artifact. That is the only useful question in this room. He did not like how quickly he agreed. By noon they had a pattern that could not yet be called a pattern. Temperature shifts when certain people passed near the corridor. No response to deliberate power increases. No response to signal language in any band they were allowed to use. No reaction to touch through the field. No reaction to recorded human speech. At 12:14, Lyra read a page of old maritime distress codes aloud in a calm, even tone while Soren monitored surface variants through a magnifier. Nothing changed. At 12:21, she stopped in the middle of a sentence to cough once into her sleeve. The surface of the artifact brightened under the maintenance light. Not a glow. A slight change in how the room returned from it, as though the object had corrected an image. Lyra lowered the paper. Soren's hand stayed on the focus ring. Do that again, he said. She looked at him. Then she coughed once more, dry and unplanned. Nothing. He adjusted the magnifier back. Then forward. Maybe it was me. You didn't move. I breathed. So did I. He looked down at the paper in her hand. Thin sheets, recycled stock, edges rougher than the station issue. When she had first brought them in, the surface cameras had tried to autocorrect the white balance for 6 full minutes. Read again, he said. She did, but not from the same line. A different paragraph. A 19th century docking protocol from a river network on Earth, translated twice before she had found it in the archive. It was absurdly specific, full of pauses and acknowledgments and statements of visible intent. She read it in the same level voice she used when declining committee requests. Soren watched the artifact and the paper together. Nothing. Lyra lowered the page. You're not listening. I am. No. You're comparing. He said nothing, which was answer enough. She stood and came around the bench. Give me the sheet. He handed over the inventory paper with the columns on the back. She folded it to match the size of her notes and laid both on the bench near the cradle, one on either side of it, not touching the field. Then she stepped back. The left bracket shifted. It was small. So small Soren would not have believed himself if he had not been looking at the gauge. 1/4 millimeter inward. Enough to center the cradle perfectly for the first time since the object entered the room. Neither of them moved. The maintenance light hummed. Lyra's tea let off a line of steam. Soren could see the chip in the cup from where he stood. After a while he said, "Paper. Not paper. Shape, maybe." She shook her head. "Placement." He looked from one sheet to the other. "Symmetry. Possibly." He reached for the inventory page. "Leave it," she said. He stopped. For the next hour they tested without testing. That was the only way either of them trusted the result. Lyra relocated her notes by inches. Soren changed nothing mechanical. When the pages framed the cradle unevenly, the bracket drifted back out. When they were placed in near balance, it corrected itself. Not instantly, not obediently, but with the slow, deliberate adjustment of something refusing to make its purpose easy. At 14:10, Soren brought in 2 blank maintenance forms from the printer tray and replaced Lyra's handwritten notes with them. No shift. Lyra returned her own pages to the bench. After 17 seconds, the bracket aligned. Soren looked at the notes more closely. Pencil marks, margins, pressure dents from previous pages. A faint print of her thumb near the lower edge. "It isn't the paper," he said. She sat down very carefully. "No." He drew the magnifier closer to the field and angled it to inspect the surface. "It doesn't react to speech playback. It doesn't react to power. It doesn't react to the body as a body. It reacts to—" He stopped. Lyra waited. He picked up the blank maintenance form and laid it over his own checklist, then removed it again. "Use." At 14:36, they asked station support to send down archived notebooks from storage. Any age, any condition, preferably handwritten. No explanation. At 15:02, before the notebooks arrived, Lyra left for 6 minutes to speak with command. Soren remained in the lab alone with the artifact, the cups, the folded forms, and the small corrected bracket. He did not approach the cradle right away. He tidied the bench instead, closed the driver case, res-tacked the papers, moved the chipped cup farther from the instruments. He set Lyra's pencil beside her chair, parallel to the desk. When he finally stood in front of the artifact, he kept his hands behind his back. Its surface held the room in a blurred, impossible way. The bench was there. The light was there. His own outline was there only when he looked at it indirectly. Straight on, he was absent. He leaned a little to the left. A shape moved inside the blur. Not movement exactly. Recognition of movement. As if the object had already accounted for him and was now checking whether he still matched. Soren stayed very still. The outer hatch indicator clicked green. 3 minutes early again. This time, before the buzzer sounded, the artifact's surface cleared for a fraction of a second and showed him something simple and impossible. Not an image, not a map, not language. A desk. Metal. Narrow. One drawer pulled slightly open. And on it, placed with exact care, a chipped ceramic cup beside a stack of paper. Then the surface softened, and the room returned. When Lyra came back in with 2 old notebooks under her arm, Soren was still standing in the same place. She set the notebooks down without asking what he had seen. One was bound in black cloth. The other had a red thread showing at the spine. She looked at the bench, the cups, the artifact, then at him. What changed? Soren picked up the chipped cup and moved it 2 inches closer to the papers. The left bracket slipped inward and locked. Lyra put one hand flat on the desk. Not touching the cradle. Not touching him. "All right," she said. Soren did not answer. He was looking at the artifact the way he had looked at the stalled calibration strip that morning, with patience first and disbelief arranged behind it. On the bench, steam no longer rose from the tea. No one reached for it. The notebooks smelled faintly of adhesive and old dust, though neither should have survived in station storage long enough to keep a smell. Lyra opened the black one first. Its cover resisted for a second, then gave with a dry flex. The pages inside were ruled and unevenly filled. Some entries were in narrow upright print, others hurried and slanted. A maintenance ledger, maybe, personal notes folded into official records. The sort of thing people made when systems were available but paper felt harder to argue with. Soren moved the second chair to the far side of the desk and sat without looking away from the cradle. The chipped cup remained where he had placed it. Beside it lay Lyra's notes, the inventory sheet, and now the open notebook. An arrangement that no longer looked accidental. "Read," he said. Lyra turned one page, then another. Not yet. She was watching the artifact too. Not directly. Through the reflection in the glass wall, where the room came back to them softened and slightly delayed. Soren had started doing the same without deciding to. The maintenance light above the cradle held steady. The bracket remained perfectly centered. Lyra touched the notebook with 2 fingers and slid it half an inch to the left. Nothing. She turned it 90 degrees and set it back. The right rear bracket ticked outward, then returned. Soren looked at the gauge. Orientation. Maybe. She rotated the notebook again, back to its original position. The gauge settled. The small movement was enough. Enough to suggest preference without surrendering the rule behind it. Soren leaned forward, elbows off the table. It's not matching objects. It's matching relations. Lyra kept one hand on the page. Between things. Between placed things. That still leaves too much. He reached for the second notebook. Red thread at the spine, softer cover. Pages that had warped slightly as if they had once been damp and dried flat. He set it on the bench opposite the first one, balancing the cradle. The temperature display dropped half a degree. Lyra's eyes narrowed, not in surprise but in concentration. She moved the red thread notebook closer to the chipped cup. The temperature steadied. She nudged it farther away. The bracket on the left drifted outward by a fraction. "It isn't just balance," she said. Soren got up, crossed to the side cabinet, and returned with a sealed station ration bar. He set it where the red thread notebook had been. No response. He took it away and replaced it with the notebook again. The bracket corrected. Lyra turned a page. Used objects. Handled objects. Context-bearing objects. He glanced at her. "You were going to say that." "I was going to say marked." She let that sit between them. From the corridor beyond the lab, a trolley rolled past. This will had a flat spot. Every third turn came a soft knock, then another after the same interval. The artifact did nothing. The sound moved on and faded. Lyra began reading the notebook in silence. Her eyes moved steadily. Not quick, not slow. The way she read when she was letting the text arrange itself before judging it. Soren stayed at the instruments, logging each tiny drift of temperature and bracket alignment while trying not to force a pattern into numbers that had only just admitted one existed. After a few minutes, Lyra placed the heel of her hand on the left page and held there. The surface of the artifact changed. It did not brighten this time. The room in it became shallower, as if the object had reduced the distance between what it showed and what stood before it. Soren saw the bench, the cup, the slant of her wrist. He saw, very briefly, a second edge beneath the desk that did not belong to Orpheus. He looked up. Lyra had not moved. "Did you see that?" He nodded once. "Furniture." "Yes." "Not ours." "No." She lifted her hand from the page. The surface returned to its earlier blur. Soren wrote nothing down for several seconds, then forced himself to enter a single line into the log. Contact with handwritten surface correlated with visual modulation. Lyra closed the notebook gently. "That's a bad sentence. It will do until we know what is wrong with it. That may take a while. It usually does." She looked almost amused. Almost. At 16:08, station support delivered 6 more notebooks in a gray archive crate. Nemat brought them himself and stood at the threshold waiting to be told where to place them. He had learned that much, at least. Lyra pointed to the side bench. He set the crate down, noticed the ceramic cups, and then the papers arranged around the cradle. He did not mention either. "Command wants a summary by 1800, he said. Lyra turned a page in the black notebook without looking up. "They will get one." Nemat lingered a second too long. They asked if it's active. Soren said, "No." Lyra said at the same time, "Not in the way they mean." Nemat gave a small nod that suggested he preferred Soren's answer and left with it. When the hatch sealed, Lyra marked a line in the margin of the ledger with her pencil. "Was that necessary?" Soren asked. "Yes." "For command or for him?" She did not answer. He let it go. They worked through the notebooks one by one. 3 were station logs from the first years of Orpheus, before the current crew rotation, filled with inventory lists, maintenance records, tiny complaints, route sketches, half-finished calculations. 1 was a child's exercise book from Earth, somehow packed into the archive by mistake or sentiment, containing multiplication tables on the first pages and a drawing of 3 birds on the last. 1 was empty except for a name written twice inside the cover and crossed out both times. The final one held interview notes from a decommissioned language project, copied by hand from older digital transcripts after a storage failure decades earlier. The artifact did not react to all of them equally. The child's book did almost nothing until Lyra turned to the bird drawing and laid the page open. Then the cradle temperature dropped again, sharper this time. The gauge on the left flicked inward, corrected, held. Soren stood up from the monitor. "Why that page?" Lyra traced the empty air over the drawing without touching it. "Maybe because it wasn't for record." "Then why the maintenance ledger?" "Because it was." He frowned. "The same hand," she said. "Repeated action. Intent held in sequence. That covers everything we do." "Not quite." She set the exercise book aside and reached for the interview notes. "Most of what we do is for outcome. Some things are done to make a trace." He watched her open the notes. "You think it recognizes traces. I think it recognizes arrangement made by a mind expecting to return." Soren looked at the chipped cup. The tea had gone cold an hour ago. Neither of them had replaced it. He took the cup, walked it to the sink alcove, rinsed it, dried it, and returned it to the exact place it had been before. A childish test. He knew that while doing it, the bracket did not move. Lyra noticed. So, not exact position. Not exact sequence either. But sequence mattered when you moved it. He sat again. Maybe interruption matters more than order. She thought about that while turning pages. The interview notebook contained fragments of old speech studies. Nothing valuable by current standards. People describing names for tools, weather patterns, kinship terms. Corrections scribbled in the margin by an impatient researcher with neat handwriting. At the center of the book, a page had been folded once and opened again so many times the crease had begun to tear. Lyra held on that page. Soren saw it before she spoke. Not the words, the shape of the where. Repeated return to one place. "Leave that open," he said. She did. The artifact's surface thinned. Not fully. Enough to show depth where before there had only been softened reflection. Soren stood slowly and came around the bench. In the object, beneath the skewed return of the lab, another space took form in pale layers. Metal desk again. Narrow. One drawer ajar. A panel light somewhere above and behind it. Not a recording. Not exactly. The angle shifted when he shifted. The drawer stayed where it was. Lyra remained seated. "Same room." "I think so." "What changed?" He pointed at the folded page. She lowered her eyes to the notes. The handwriting there was different from the rest. Smaller, more compressed. An inserted correction perhaps, copied from another source. She read in silence for a while, then said, "It's not linguistic data. It's a field annotation." "About what?" "About a witness." Soren waited. Lyra read again, slower this time. The line says, "He would only answer after the objects were placed back where he had left them." The lab seemed to contract around that sentence. Soren looked at the artifact, then at the notebooks, then at the station bench with its cups and papers and pencil laid parallel to the edge. "That's not enough." "No." "But it's not nothing." "No." She tore the line carefully from the notebook. Soren looked at her. "You're damaging archive material." "Yes." She folded the strip once and placed it beside the chipped cup. The artifact cleared further. This time the desk inside it was unmistakable. Not theirs. Similar scale, different construction. The surface was darker, worn at the edge by repeated contact. On it sat 3 objects. A shallow dish, a rectangular stack of paper, and a cup with a pale mark on one side where glaze had broken away. Lyra did not move. Soren said, "It's showing us a correspondence. Or asking for one." The difference mattered too much to resolve quickly. They spent the next hour testing restraint. That was harder than testing action. Each new response from the artifact suggested 10 crude experiments neither of them trusted. Touch it. Move the cradle. Brighten the lights. Bring in more people. Ask command for a neural mapper. Ask for an armed guard because somebody above would eventually do that if the summaries got stranger. Instead, Lyra rearranged only what was already present. Paper, pencil, cup, notebook, her hand. Sometimes Soren added one more object from the room. A folded cloth, his driver, the old inventory sheet, and watched to see whether the object accepted the change or ignored it. Most additions were ignored. Some were gently refused. The brackets drifted. The surface clouded. The temperature rose back toward baseline as if the room had become less legible. At 1716, Soren made the first real mistake. He brought over a personal item from his locker. A worn plastic card with his training certification code embossed on one side. He had carried it for years out of habit. It no longer opened anything. The corners were soft from handling. He placed it beside the cup. Nothing happened. He placed it on top of the stack of forms. Still nothing. Then he set it directly between the cup and Lyra's torn strip of annotation. The artifact went dark. Not visually dark. Functionally. Every monitor line fell flat at once. Temperature normal. Field stable. Bracket neutral. The surface lost not only the hidden desk but the room itself and became a blank plane that reflected only light with dead accuracy. Like painted metal. Lyra removed her hand from the desk. Soren picked up the card at once and stepped back. The artifact stayed blank. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Lyra said, "Was that yours?" "Yes." "Used recently?" "No." "Kept?" "Yes." She stood and gathered the papers in careful silence. Not away from the cradle. Into order. Notes stacked. Torn strip placed back on the folded page. Notebook shut. Pencil aligned. Cup shifted slightly to the right. Nothing. Soren put the card in his pocket and waited. Lyra took the chipped cup with both hands and held it for a moment, warming cold ceramic with living skin. Then she set it back down. The surface of the artifact softened. Not fully restored, but no longer blank. Soren let out a breath so quietly it barely counted as sound. Lyra said, "Don't introduce memory without context." He looked at her. "That sounds like you had that sentence prepared." "I do now." At 1752, command called again for the summary. This time Lyra answered from the wall console while Soren stayed at the bench. He could hear only her side. "No activation," she said. Pause. "Yes, it is responsive." Longer pause. "No, I don't recommend personnel expansion." Pause. "That is not caution. It is method." Another pause. She glanced toward him, then at the object. "Because if we crowd the room, it may stop recognizing the room at all." Silence while she listened. "No, we do not have evidence of threat." A final pause. "Yes, I understand that is different from reassurance." She ended the call. Soren looked up from the gauges. "How was that received?" "It was written down," she said. "Which means it will become someone else's certainty by morning." The station lights shifted toward evening mode, barely dimmer than before. The change slid across the lab in a way the artifact noticed immediately. Its surface adjusted, not to match the new light but to preserve the old one inside itself for a few seconds longer. A delay. An insistence. Lyra saw it too. "It isn't just reading objects," she said quietly. "No, it's preserving arrangements." Soren looked at the desk in the artifact, visible again now in fragments between the softened return of their own lab. The cup there, the paper, the waiting drawer, Or comparing them, he said. He moved closer, one step only. The hidden room sharpened a fraction. Enough for him to see that the paper stack on the other desk was tied with a thin band, slightly off-center. Enough to see that the chipped cup there had been set down in a ring left by previous use. Enough to see one more thing. A handprint, faint and partial, on the drawer front below the desk. Human-shaped, maybe, not current, not fresh, a residue of touch, caught in the angle of the light. Lyra came to stand beside him. She did not ask what he saw. Her gaze had already found it. After a while, she bent, picked up the black ledger, and placed it on the bench exactly where the paper stack appeared in the artifact's hidden room. The drawer inside the image opened another inch. Nothing in the lab moved except the small gauge on the left bracket, settling into perfect center. Neither of them reached forward. The drawer did not open further. It stayed where it was, a small gap in the other room that seemed too deliberate to be accidental and too slight to be useful. Soren watched it without blinking for longer than was comfortable. When he finally shifted his weight, the image held. That mattered more than anything the drawer might contain. Lyra reached for the pencil and rolled it between her fingers once, then set it down again. The sound was soft, a light tap against the desk. The artifact did not react. "Don't push it," she said. "I'm not. You are." He stepped back half a pace. The hidden desk dulled slightly but did not vanish. The bracket remained centered. On the bench, the black ledger sat where she had placed it, aligned with a space that only existed when they looked through the artifact. The torn strip of annotation rested near the chipped cup, not touching it. The red thread notebook lay just outside the arrangement, as if waiting to be invited back in. Soren glanced at the gauge, then at the papers. "We should log the position exactly. Later, if we lose it, we won't keep it by writing it down." He considered that, then nodded once. The station's evening cycle deepened. The overhead light dimmed another fraction. The air system shifted pitch almost imperceptibly. Small changes that would have gone unnoticed on any other day now felt like variables to be accounted for. Lyra slid her chair back and stood. She walked to the wall console and turned off the secondary maintenance light above the far bench. The room grew more uniform. No bright spots. No shadowed corners. The artifact adjusted. The hidden desk held. Soren watched the edges of the image. The place where their lab and the other room overlapped was not fixed. It drifted by millimeters depending on where he stood. The drawer remained constant. The handprint remained faint but present. He leaned slightly to the right. The drawer did not move, but the angle of the handprint shifted, as if the surface it belonged to had depth. "Parallax," he said. Lyra returned to the bench. "Which means it isn't a flat projection." "No." "Which means it isn't a recording." "No." She sat again and placed her hand flat on the desk, not touching the arrangement. The artifact's surface steadied. "Then it's an alignment," she said. "Between rooms. Between arrangements." He looked at her. "And we are halfway." She did not answer. At 1823, Soren opened the drawer in their own desk. It was an old unit, rarely used, with a slight resistance at the start of its track. He pulled it out 2 inches and stopped. The artifact flickered. Not visibly, not like light. The hidden desk shifted a fraction, then returned. The drawer there did not change. Lyra watched his hand on the metal handle. "Close it." He did. The image steadied. "Don't mirror it directly," she said. "I wasn't. You were thinking about it." He let go of the handle. "We need a rule. We have one. Which is, don't impose. That's not a rule. That's a restraint. It will do." He nodded, though it did not satisfy him. They worked with what they already had. Lyra moved the torn strip of annotation closer to the ledger. The bracket held. She rotated it slightly so the line of text faced the cup. The hidden desk sharpened along one edge, the paper stack there becoming more distinct. Soren adjusted his position again, slow enough to avoid introducing movement into the system. The parallax confirmed depth. The handprint on the drawer was not a smudge. It had ridges, faint, as if captured at a moment of pressure. He looked at his own hand. "Don't," Lyra said. "I wasn't going to." "You were." He rested his hands on the back of the chair instead. At 1841, the station announced a routine systems check over the intercom. The voice was neutral, almost apologetic. Lights would dim for 30 seconds. Non-critical systems would cycle. Lyra looked at the ceiling, then at the artifact. "We should hold." Soren did not move. The lights dimmed. The artifact did not follow. For a brief interval, the lab lost brightness while the hidden desk retained it. The other room appeared clearer than their own. The cup there showed its chipped edge more sharply. The paper stacks band cast a thin shadow. Soren felt the imbalance without naming it. When the lights returned, the artifact took a second to reconcile the two states. The hidden room dulled slightly, then settled. Lyra exhaled quietly. "It remembers light. Or prefers continuity. Or both." He wrote a short line in the log without looking away. Independent luminance persistence during station dim cycle. At 1856, Lyra brought the red thread notebook back into the arrangement. She did not place it immediately. She held it above the desk, then lowered it slowly to the right of the ledger, leaving a narrow gap. The bracket twitched, then centered. The hidden desk responded by revealing more of its surface along the right edge. A second object came into view, previously occluded. A small rectangular item, thinner than the paper stack, placed near the edge of the desk. Soren leaned slightly left to see around the overlap. It was not a tool, not a device. It had no visible markings. Its surface looked worn, like something handled often and set down in the same place. "A card," he said. Lyra glanced at him. "Not ours," he added. She nodded once. The association was immediate and unwelcome. Soren felt the weight of the plastic card in his pocket. He did not reach for it. "Context," Lyra said, as if reminding herself. "Not repetition. Not replacement." He agreed. They did not introduce his card again. Instead, Lyra turned the red thread notebook so that its spine faced the cup. The bracket held. The hidden desk's right edge clarified further. The rectangular item became more distinct, its position fixed relative to the cup and the paper stack. Soren traced the distances with his eyes. Cup to paper, paper to drawer, drawer to card. "Relative positions," he said. "Maintained across rooms." He nodded. "Then we should maintain ours." She adjusted the torn strip again, aligning it with the edge of the ledger. The artifact's surface smoothed, as if acknowledging the correction. At 1912, Soren noticed something he had missed before. The handprint on the drawer was not centered. It was offset slightly to the left, as if the person who had placed it there had been standing at an angle. The fingers were not fully extended. The thumb was not visible. "Look," he said. Lyra stepped closer. She did not lean in. She shifted her stance by a fraction, aligning her view with his. "Partial," she said. "Pressure here," he said, indicating the lower edge. "Not a grip. A rest. Or a pause." They stood with that for a while. The lab had grown quieter. The corridor traffic had thinned. The air system's low hum settled into the background again. Lyra returned to her chair and sat. "We're not being shown everything," she said. "No. We're being shown what holds." He considered that. "Then we need to hold it," he said. She nodded. They stabilized the arrangement. No more movement. No more additions. The ledger, the torn strip, the cup, the red thread notebook, and the empty space between them were left as they were. Soren marked the positions with small, unobtrusive indicators on the bench. Tiny pieces of tape at the edges, not touching the objects, just enough to guide their return if anything shifted. Lyra watched him place each marker. "You're making a map," she said. "A reference. Maps imply travel. References imply return." She accepted that. At 1940, Lyra stood and stretched her fingers, then placed both hands flat on the desk, one on either side of the arrangement, not touching it. The artifact responded. The hidden desk deepened. The drawer opened another fraction, just enough to suggest that the gap was not fixed but conditional. Soren did not move. "Hold that," he said. She did. The muscles in her forearms tightened slightly, visible beneath the skin. She did not shift. Soren stepped to the side, adjusting his view to maximize the parallax. The interior of the drawer became faintly visible. Not its contents, but its depth. Enough to confirm it was not empty. He felt the urge to reach forward. He did not. "Do you see inside?" he asked. "Not clearly. Something is there." "Of course." He almost smiled at that. They held the position for as long as Lyra could maintain it without strain. When she lifted her hands, the drawer returned to its earlier gap. Soren wrote another line in the log. Dual-hand proximity increases depth resolution. Drawer aperture conditional. Lyra sat again and picked up the chipped cup, then set it down without drinking. "We need to decide," she said. "On what? Whether we're trying to access it or understand it." He looked at the artifact. "Both," he said. "That's how we lose it." He did not argue. At 2003, Command sent a message instead of calling. A text block appeared on the wall console, requesting a preliminary classification: inert, reactive, communicative, or unknown. Lyra read it, then closed the message without responding. Soren glanced at her. "We have to answer." "We will. When? When the answer is less wrong." He nodded. The station lights shifted again, deeper into the night cycle. The lab took on a softer tone. The artifact preserved the earlier light for a moment, then let it go. Soren stood at the bench, hands at his sides, watching the hidden desk. The arrangement held. The drawer remained slightly open. The handprint remained faint. The card on the other desk remained in place. He reached into his pocket, felt the edge of his own card, and then withdrew his hand without taking it out. Lyra saw the movement. "Good," she said. He did not reply. They stood in silence for a while longer. At 2031, the artifact changed again. Not in brightness, not in position. In timing. The hidden desk flickered, not visibly, but in the sequence of its appearance. For a fraction of a second, it showed a slightly different arrangement. The cup was closer to the paper. The band around the stack was looser. The drawer was open a little more. Then it returned to the present alignment. Soren felt the shift. "Did you see that?" Lyra nodded. "Sequence," she said. "Not just space. Not just placement." He looked at the objects on their own bench. "Then we're not aligning with a single state," he said. "We're aligning with a series." She picked up the pencil and wrote one word on the margin of her notes, then underlined it once. "Return." She set the pencil down parallel to the edge of the desk. The artifact steadied. The hidden desk held. The drawer did not open further. Soren placed his hands flat on the bench, not touching the arrangement, mirroring Lyra's earlier position without thinking about it. The artifact deepened again. For a moment, the interior of the drawer was visible. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to show that the object inside it was not random. It was placed, deliberately, waiting. Soren lifted his hands. The image softened. Neither of them spoke. The seam between two floor panels near the bench shifted a fraction of a millimeter, then returned. Soren noticed it because he had been staring at the same line for too long. The panels were old, edges worn smooth by years of foot traffic. They didn't move, not unless someone put weight on them, and even then the change was felt more than seen. He shifted his stance. The seam did not move again. Across the bench, Lyra had both hands resting lightly on either side of the arrangement. Not touching, not holding, just present. The posture had become familiar in the last hour, a way of remaining in the system without altering it. "Did you see that?" he said. "Where?" "Floor seam." She glanced down, then back at the artifact. "No." He let it go. The hidden desk remained steady, but the sense of it had changed. Not in shape or clarity. In timing. The earlier flicker had not returned, but Soren could feel a lag in how the object reconciled their movements with what it showed. A delay measured in fractions of a second, just enough to notice if you were already looking for it. He adjusted his position slightly. The image followed, then corrected. Lyra lifted one hand and shifted the red thread notebook by the width of a finger. The bracket held. The drawer inside the artifact opened another fraction. Soren exhaled slowly. That's consistent. Conditional, she said. On what? Not pressure. Not proximity. Not sequence alone. He watched her hand hover above the desk. Then what? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she lifted the torn strip of annotation and placed it closer to the ledger, aligning its edge with a faint pencil mark she had made earlier. The movement was small, deliberate, the kind of adjustment that carried intention without announcing it. The artifact responded. The hidden desk deepened. The interior of the drawer became clearer, though still incomplete. The object inside resolved enough to suggest edges, not enough to identify. Soren leaned to the side. The parallax confirmed it. The object was rectangular, slightly thicker than the card on the desk above it. Placed near the front of the drawer, not centered. Still not enough, he said. No, Lyra replied. She withdrew her hand and sat back. The image held. Soren glanced at the log display. The numbers were stable. Temperature slightly below baseline. Field unchanged. Brackets centered. He wrote a short line without looking away. Drawer aperture increases with relational alignment. Interior object partially resolved. The station air system shifted again, a soft change in pressure that made the room feel narrower for a moment. The artifact did not react. Lyra reached for the chipped cup, lifted it, and held it in both hands. She did not drink. After a few seconds, she set it back down, not exactly where it had been before, but close enough to pass as the same position. The bracket flicked inward, then returned. Soren noticed. That matters. Not enough to fix. Enough to disturb. She nodded. He stepped back and looked at the entire arrangement. The papers, the cup, the notebooks, the empty spaces between them. It was beginning to feel less like a set of objects and more like a configuration that needed to be maintained, like a balance that was not static but held through small corrections. Do you think it's comparing to a specific moment? He asked. Yes. Which one? She looked at the artifact. Not ours. He almost smiled. That's not helpful. It's accurate. He accepted that. At 2057, the corridor light outside the lab flickered once. Not a failure. A routine adjustment as the station shifted deeper into night mode. The change was visible through the narrow glass panel beside the door. The artifact reacted. The hidden desk dimmed slightly, then corrected, preserving its earlier luminance for a fraction longer than the room itself. Soren noticed the delay. It's holding the previous state. Or prioritizing it. Why? Lyra considered. Because it expects continuity. From us. From the arrangement. He nodded. She stood and walked to the wall console, then paused with her hand hovering over the controls. We could test that. How? Interrupt the cycle. He shook his head. No. She lowered her hand. Agreed. They returned to the bench. The hidden desk remained visible, the drawer still slightly open, the handprint unchanged. Soren leaned closer, careful not to cross the invisible boundary where movement became influence. The handprint had more detail now, not clearer exactly, more accessible. The ridges suggested a human pattern, but not identical to his own. The proportions were slightly different, the spacing between fingers narrower. He held his hand up beside the image, not touching. Different, he said. Lyra glanced at him, then at the handprint. Not necessarily. Look at the spacing. Angle, she said. Not size. He adjusted his position. The handprint shifted with the parallax, aligning more closely with his own hand when viewed from a different angle. He lowered his hand. Angle, he repeated. Yes. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lyra did something neither of them had done yet. She moved around the bench and stood on the opposite side, changing her perspective entirely. The artifact responded. The hidden desk rotated subtly, not physically, but in how it presented itself. The parallax adjusted, offering a new angle on the drawer and the objects within. Soren watched. Position matters, he said. Of the observer, she replied. Not just the arrangement. No. She leaned slightly forward. The drawer opened another fraction. Soren felt the change more than saw it. Hold that, he said. She did. He moved to align his view with hers, stepping carefully to avoid introducing unnecessary motion. From this angle, the interior of the drawer became clearer. The object inside was not alone. There were two items. One rectangular as before, the other smaller, irregular in shape, placed beside it. Soren focused. The smaller object had a curve to it. A shallow arc. Not a tool. Not a device. Ceramic, he said quietly. Lyra did not move. Fragment. He nodded. A chipped piece of something. The association was immediate. He looked at the cup on their bench. Then back at the drawer. Correspondence, he said. Not duplication, she replied. He stepped back. The image softened. Lyra straightened. The drawer returned to its earlier aperture. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Soren said, We're not just matching positions. No, we're matching relationships between objects that carry use. Yes. And the artifact is selecting which relationships matter. She nodded. Based on what? Continuity. He looked at her. Of what? She gestured toward the bench. Of intent. He did not argue. At 21:24, the station sent a low-priority alert to the lab console. Routine maintenance in the outer corridor. No action required. Lyra glanced at it, then dismissed it. Soren remained focused on the artifact. The hidden desk held steady. The drawer did not open further. The handprint remained faint. He felt a pressure building not in the room but in the process. A sense that they were approaching a boundary. Not a limit imposed by the artifact, but one defined by how far they could go without breaking the conditions that allowed it to respond. He looked at Lyra. We need to decide how far we're willing to go. She met his gaze. We already have. He waited. She picked up the chipped cup, held it for a moment, then set it down slightly closer to the ledger than before. The bracket flicked inward, then settled. The hidden desk sharpened. The drawer opened another fraction. Soren felt the shift. Careful, he said. I am. She moved her hand away. The image held. He stepped closer, aligning his view with the new configuration. The interior of the drawer was now visible enough to distinguish the rectangular object clearly. It was not a card. It was thicker, edges worn, surface marked by repeated handling. A notebook, smaller than the ones on their bench, bound differently, but unmistakable. The second object, the ceramic fragment, rested beside it. Soren exhaled slowly. Another record, he said. Lyra nodded. Not just objects, he added. Traces. He looked at the handprint again. Someone else did this, he said. Yes. Before us. Yes. He straightened. And they left something in the drawer. Lyra did not respond. He turned to her. We need to see it. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at the artifact. Not by forcing it, she said. No. By returning it. He considered that. Return what? She gestured toward the arrangement. What's missing? He followed her gesture. The cup. The ledger. The torn strip. The red thread notebook. The empty spaces between them. He looked at his pocket, then back at the bench. No, he said. She nodded. Not that. He felt a small relief. Then what? She picked up the child's exercise book from the side bench and brought it over. She opened it to the page with the 3 birds. She placed it gently beside the ledger, aligning its edge with the pencil mark. The artifact responded. The hidden desk deepened. The drawer opened another fraction. The interior became clearer. Soren leaned in. The notebook inside the drawer was now visible enough to see its cover. Dark, worn, marked by use. Not identical to any on their bench, but similar enough to suggest continuity. He looked at Lyra. She did not move. Hold, he said. She did. They stood in silence, maintaining the arrangement. The artifact held the image. The drawer remained open, the contents visible. Waiting, neither of them reached forward. A thin line of dust lifted from the edge of the side bench and drifted sideways, then settled again in nearly the same place. Soren saw it because he had stopped trying to see the drawer. He stood a little farther back now, hands resting lightly on the back of the chair, not touching the bench, not touching anything that had become part of the arrangement. The impulse to move closer had not gone away, but it had changed shape. It had become something he could observe. Lyra had not moved for several minutes. The exercise book lay open beside the ledger, the drawing of 3 birds facing inward toward the center of the arrangement. The torn strip of annotation was aligned with the ledger's edge. The chipped cup sat just beyond it, slightly closer than before. The red thread notebook held its place to the right, its spine angled toward the cup. The artifact held the hidden desk steady. The drawer remained open enough to reveal its contents. Soren shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The image did not follow. He looked at Lyra. "Stability," he said. "Conditional," she replied without turning. He nodded. The dust line on the bench had not returned to exactly where it had been. A few particles remained out of place, catching the light differently. He reached for a cloth, then stopped before touching it. Lyra noticed the motion. "Leave it. It's minor. It's part of the room." He withdrew his hand. They let the dust remain. At 21:38, the corridor trolley passed again. The same flat spot in the wheel. The same soft knock every 3rd rotation. The sound entered the lab, crossed it, and faded. The artifact did not react. But Soren noticed something else. The timing of the knock did not align with the image in the artifact. The hidden desk remained steady, unaffected by the rhythm of the passing trolley. The delay he had sensed earlier was still there, but now it seemed selective. "External noise doesn't register," he said. "Not unless it's part of the arrangement," Lyra replied. He considered that. "Then the boundary isn't physical," he said. "No, it's relational." "Yes." He looked at the drawer again. The notebook inside remained in place. The ceramic fragment beside it caught a thin line of light, its curved edge reflecting just enough to define its shape. He felt the urge to know what was written in that notebook. He did not move. Lyra shifted her stance slightly, redistributing her weight. The image held. Soren watched the handprint on the drawer. It had not changed. Not in position, not in clarity, but something about it felt different. He leaned a fraction to the left. The parallax adjusted. The handprint aligned more closely with his own perspective. He raised his hand again, not to touch, but to compare. The spacing matched. The angle matched. The proportions matched. He lowered his hand. "Same," he said. Lyra turned her head slightly. "What?" "The handprint." She stood and moved to his side. She did not raise her hand. She adjusted her position instead, aligning her view with his. The handprint resolved in the same way. "Not just similar," he said. "No." She did not finish the sentence. They both understood. At 21:46, the station lights dimmed another increment. The artifact held the previous luminance for a moment, then adjusted. The hidden desk remained visible. The drawer remained open, the contents unchanged. Soren exhaled slowly. "We're close," he said. Lyra did not respond immediately. She was looking at the arrangement on the bench, then at the hidden desk, then back at the bench. "Not yet," she said. He nodded. She reached for the pencil. Soren watched her hand. She did not write. She placed the pencil down again, but not parallel to the desk this time. At a slight angle, the artifact reacted. The bracket flicked inward. The hidden desk sharpened. The drawer opened another fraction. Soren felt the change. "Angle," he said. "Not alignment," she replied. He nodded. She adjusted the pencil again, rotating it a few degrees. The image responded, not by opening further, but by clarifying the edges of the objects inside the drawer. The notebook's cover showed faint markings now. Not text, where patterns. lines where fingers had pressed repeatedly. Soren leaned closer, careful not to cross the boundary. The ceramic fragment beside it showed a chipped edge that matched the curve of the cup on their bench. Not identical, but corresponding. Fragment of the same object, he said. Or the same kind of use, Lyra replied. He considered that. She withdrew her hand. The image held. Soren stepped back. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "We need to test sequence again." She looked at him. "Not by adding," he continued. "By removing." She nodded. He reached for the red thread notebook. "Careful," she said. "I will." He lifted it slowly. The artifact dimmed slightly. The bracket drifted outward. The drawer inside the image began to close. Soren froze. "Stop," Lyra said. He held the notebook in place, just above the desk. The image stabilized. The drawer stopped closing. Soren lowered the notebook back into its original position. The bracket centered. The drawer returned to its previous aperture. He exhaled. "Removal matters," he said. "Yes. Not just placement." "Yes." He set his hands back on the chair. Lyra looked at the arrangement again. Then at the hidden desk. Then back at the arrangement. "We're not missing an object," she said. "What then?" "A state." He frowned slightly. She picked up the chipped cup. Held it. Set it down. No change. She picked up the ledger. Turned one page. Closed it again. No change. She lifted the exercise book. Looked at the drawing. Placed it back. No change. Soren watched her. "You're testing memory," he said. She nodded. "Not just objects," he added. "Not just placement." He felt the shift in understanding. The artifact was not responding to static arrangements alone. It was responding to actions that implied return. He looked at the handprint again. A pause. A rest. A moment before continuation. He stepped forward slightly. Not enough to disturb the arrangement. Enough to change his perspective. The image deepened. The drawer opened a fraction more. Lyra noticed. "Position," she said. "Yes." "Combined with state." He nodded. She stood. Moved to his side. Adjusted her stance to match his. The image clarified further. The interior of the drawer became visible enough to see the notebook's edge clearly. And something else. A second mark. Not on the notebook. On the inside of the drawer. A faint line. Drawn or scratched. Soren focused. It was not random. It was deliberate. A single line. Then a second crossing it. Not a symbol. Not a letter. A mark of counting. "2," he said. Lyra nodded. "Second attempt," she said. "Or second return." He looked at her. She did not elaborate. At 22:12, the station sent another message. Lyra ignored it. Soren did not look away from the artifact. The hidden desk held steady. The drawer remained open. The contents visible. The handprint unchanged. He felt the boundary again. Not a limit imposed by the artifact. A limit imposed by them. "How far do we go?" he asked quietly. Lyra did not answer immediately. She looked at the arrangement. Then at the hidden desk. Then at the handprint. Finally, she said, "Far enough to understand." "And not further." She nodded. He accepted that. They stood in silence. The lab had grown very still. Even the air system seemed quieter. The artifact held the image. The arrangement held its state. Soren reached into his pocket. Paused. Withdrew his hand empty. Lyra saw. "Good," she said. He nodded. At 22:31, the artifact changed again. Not in brightness. Not in position. In sequence. The hidden desk flickered. For a fraction of a second, the arrangement inside it shifted. The cup moved. The paper stack loosened. The drawer opened wider. Then it returned. Soren felt the pattern. "Sequence," he said. "Return," Lyra replied. He looked at the arrangement on their bench. Then at the hidden desk. Then back again. "We're not aligning with a single moment," he said. "No. A series." "Yes." He nodded. The realization settled. The artifact was not showing them a static scene. It was showing them a sequence of states. And they were aligning with one of them. He placed his hands flat on the bench. Not touching the arrangement. The image deepened. The drawer opened further. The interior became clearer. Lyra stepped beside him. Matched his position. The image held. For a moment, the contents of the drawer were fully visible. The notebook, the ceramic fragment, the marks on the inside, and something else. A space, an absence, a place where something had been. Soren saw it. Lyra saw it. Neither of them spoke. They both understood. Something had been removed, and not replaced. The image softened. The drawer returned to its earlier aperture. The arrangement held. The lab remained still. Soren stepped back. Lyra did the same. They stood in silence. The artifact did not change. The chair near the wall console was not where it had been. Soren noticed it only after he turned away from the bench. The backrest sat a few centimeters closer to the desk than before, angled slightly inward, as if someone had meant to sit and then chosen not to. He did not remember moving it. He looked at Lyra. She shook her head once. They left it as it was. The arrangement on the bench remained untouched. The ledger, the torn strip, the exercise book, the chipped cup, the red thread notebook, the angled pencil. The small pieces of tape marking their positions. The dust line, slightly broken. The air between objects that now felt as deliberate as the objects themselves. The artifact held the hidden desk steady. The drawer remained open at its narrow, conditional gap. Soren walked slowly around the bench, not to change anything, but to see it from a different side. The parallax shifted. The handprint on the drawer moved with his perspective, aligning and misaligning as expected. Lyra stayed where she was, watching the arrangement. "We missed something," he said. "Yes. Not an object. No. A state." She nodded. He stopped at the opposite side of the bench, mirroring where she had stood earlier. The image adjusted. The hidden desk rotated slightly in presentation, offering a different angle on the drawer's interior. Soren leaned forward just enough to deepen the view. The absence inside the drawer was clearer now. A space where something had been placed repeatedly, then removed. Not a void. A trace of absence. He straightened. "What do you think was there?" he asked. Lyra did not answer immediately. She stepped closer to the bench, her gaze moving from the arrangement to the artifact and back again. "Something that returns," she said. "Not just something that was used. Something that completes it." He looked at the objects on their bench. The cup, the papers, the notebooks, the pencil, the empty spaces between them. He felt the shape of the answer before he could name it. "Not an object," he said. "No. An action." She nodded. He exhaled slowly. At 22:54, the station's night cycle settled fully. The lights dimmed to their lowest operational level. The corridor beyond the lab went quiet. No more trolley. No more footsteps. Only the steady hum of systems maintaining themselves. The artifact preserved the earlier light for a moment, then let it fade. The hidden desk remained visible. The drawer unchanged. Soren moved back to his original position. Lyra joined him. They stood side by side, not touching the bench. The arrangement held. The artifact held. They did not move for several seconds. Then Lyra did something small. She picked up the chipped cup, held it, and instead of placing it back immediately, she paused. Not a long pause, just enough to register. Then she set it down. Not exactly where it had been. Slightly offset. The artifact responded. The bracket flicked inward. The hidden desk sharpened. The drawer opened a fraction more. Soren felt the shift. "Pause," he said. "Yes. Not just placement. Not just relation." He nodded. She picked up the pencil, held it, paused, set it down. The image clarified further. The interior of the drawer became more defined. The absence inside it became more precise. Soren watched. "Sequence with interruption," he said. "Return with variation," she replied. He understood. The artifact was not matching static arrangements. It was matching patterns of action. Placement. Pause. Return. He looked at the handprint on the drawer. Arrest. A pause. A moment before continuation. He stepped forward. Carefully. Placed his hand flat on the bench. Not touching the arrangement. Paused. Lifted it. The artifact responded. The hidden desk deepened. The drawer opened further. Lyra stepped beside him. Mirrored his movement. Placed her hand. Paused. Lifted it. The image held. Soren felt the alignment. Not just of objects. Of actions. He looked at the arrangement on the bench. Then at the hidden desk. Then back again. "We need to complete the sequence," he said. Lyra nodded. She looked at the objects. Then at the empty spaces. Then at the handprint. She did not reach for anything. Instead, she stepped back. Soren did the same. They stood away from the bench. The arrangement remained. The artifact held. The hidden desk remained visible. The drawer unchanged. They waited. Not moving. Not adjusting. Not introducing anything new. Time passed. Not measured. Felt. The station remained quiet. The air system steady. The light constant. The artifact did not change. Soren felt the urge to act. He did not. Lyra stood beside him. Still. After a while she spoke. "Return," she said quietly. He nodded. They stepped forward together. Not quickly. Not slowly. Placed their hands on the bench. Paused. Lifted them. The artifact responded. The hidden desk sharpened. The drawer opened further. The interior became clearer. Soren saw the notebook. The ceramic fragment. The marks on the inside. And the space. The absence. He felt the shape of the missing action. Not an object. A return that had not happened. He looked at Lyra. She met his gaze. Neither of them spoke. She turned to the side bench. Picked up the black ledger. Held it. Paused. Set it down. Not in the arrangement. Outside it. Then she picked it up again. Brought it back. Placed it in its original position. The artifact responded. The hidden desk deepened. The drawer opened further. Soren saw it. The sequence. Removal. Pause. Return. He nodded. She repeated it. Once more. The image clarified. The interior of the drawer became fully visible. The absence inside it resolved. Not empty. Waiting. Soren stepped forward. Placed his hand. Paused. Lifted it. The artifact held. He looked at the drawer. At the notebook inside. At the ceramic fragment. At the space beside them. He understood. He reached out. Stopped. Did not touch the artifact. Did not cross the boundary. Instead, he turned to the bench. Picked up the chipped cup. Held it. Paused. Set it down. Picked it up again. Brought it back. Placed it in the same position. The artifact responded. The hidden desk aligned perfectly. For a moment, the two rooms were the same. The bench. The desk. The objects. The spaces. Aligned. The drawer fully open. The contents clear. The absence filled. Not by an object. By the completion of the sequence. Soren did not reach into the drawer. Neither did Lyra. They stood still. The artifact held the alignment for a few seconds. Then gently released it. The hidden desk softened. The drawer returned to its narrow gap. The image faded back into the surface. The lab returned. Unchanged. The arrangement remained on the bench. The objects where they had been. The dust line slightly broken. The tape markers in place. The chair still slightly misaligned near the console. Soren lowered his hand. Lyra stepped back. They did not speak. After a while, Lyra moved to the wall console. She opened the message from command. The classification request. She typed a single word. Responsive. Then she added a second line. Requires return conditions. She sent it. Soren remained at the bench. He looked at the artifact. Now quiet. Now still. He picked up the pencil. Held it. Set it down parallel to the edge of the desk. The artifact did not react. He left it there. Lyra returned to the bench. She picked up the chipped cup. Rinsed it. Dried it. Placed it back. Not exactly where it had been. Close enough. They stood together for a moment, then stepped away. The lab settled. The artifact remained. Silent. Not inactive. Not waiting. Present. Soren glanced once more at the surface. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. He turned off the maintenance light. The room dimmed. The artifact did not follow. For a brief moment, it held the previous light. Then let it go. They left the lab without touching anything else. The door sealed behind them. Inside, the arrangement remained. Unchanged. Not because it was fixed. Because it had been completed.